Today, we are diving into one of the world's most ancient and honestly foundational bodies of knowledge, the incredible universe of Vedic literature. Now, this isn't just some collection of old, dusty texts. Nope. This is the very bedrock of the Indian knowledge system, and it's our window into the spiritual, social, and even scientific world of ancient India. So let's get right into this vast ocean of knowledge. But before we start breaking down the texts, I want you to think about this for a second. We usually think of knowledge as something we read in a book, right? But the origins of this literature, they're rooted in a totally different idea, an oral tradition so powerful and so precise that it preserved incredibly complex ideas for thousands of years. Just imagine that. And that idea brings us to a concept that's absolutely key to understanding the Vedas, apaurushaya. It literally means not of human origin. See, according to tradition, this knowledge wasn't written or composed by people. It was revealed to ancient sages, or rishis, while they were in a state of deep meditation. So they weren't seen as authors creating something new, but more like seers, channels for timeless, universal truths. Okay, so to help us navigate this incredible library of knowledge, here's our game plan. We're going to start by defining what the Vedas actually are, then we'll look at how they're all structured. After that, we'll explore the four core texts, move on to the philosophical layers that grew out of them, and finally, we'll try to understand why this ancient wisdom is still so relevant today. So let's kick things off with the absolute basics. What exactly are we talking about when we say the Vedas? Well, the word Veda itself comes from the Sanskrit root vid, which is super simple. It just means to know. So at its very core, Veda is knowledge. But we're not talking about just any old knowledge. This is seen as divine, sacred, and eternal knowledge about the nature of reality, the cosmos, and life itself. And what's really going to blow your mind is the timeline here. Traditional views place the development of this literature in this huge window, stretching from as early as 6000 BC all the way to around 800 BCE. I mean, just let that sink in. We're talking about a body of knowledge that captures the slow evolution of philosophy, ritual, and science over thousands of years. It's incredible. Now, a library this massive obviously needs some kind of organization, right? The Vedic literature isn't just one book. It's more like a series of layers, with each one building on the one before it. This is a really great way to picture the structure. Think of all of Vedic literature as a giant tree. The oldest texts, well, they're the deep roots and the strong trunk. And then, over centuries, branches and leaves of commentary and philosophy grew from that solid core. So this evolution happened in 4 distinct stages. It all starts with the Samhitas. These are the raw collections of hymns and mantras. Then you get the Brahmanas, which are kind of like instruction manuals for all the rituals. After that, we have the Aranyakas, or forest texts, which shift the focus from what you do externally to what it all means internally. And finally, you get to the Upanishads, the absolute peak of philosophical thought. This journey from hymn to philosophy is so important. So let's start right at the beginning. We're going to start at the foundation, the very heart of it all, the Samhitas. This is the oldest and most foundational layer of everything. Okay, so there are 4 main Samhitas, and each one corresponds to one of the 4 Vedas. This chart breaks it down perfectly. You've got the Rigveda, which is all about beautiful, poetic hymns. Then the Yajurveda, which is the practical how-to guide for rituals. The Samaveda takes those hymns and sets them to music. And finally, the Atharvaveda is like a collection of spells and wisdom for everyday life. The Rigveda. This is the big one. It's the oldest and most important of them all, and it's even considered the world's first organized literary work. It's a massive collection. We're talking 1,028 hymns, organized into 10 books called mandalas. And these aren't just simple prayers. They're these intricate, beautiful poems of praise dedicated to cosmic forces, like Agni, the fire, Surya, the sun, and Indra, the god of thunder. Next up is the Yajurveda. This was the essential handbook for priests who were performing sacrifices, or yajna. And it's interesting because, as you can see here, it comes in 2 main versions. You've got the Shukla, or white Yajurveda, which is like a clean, well-organized manual with just the prayers. But then you have the Krishna, or black Yajurveda, which is more of a mix, where the prayers are woven together with explanations. It was this practical focus that made it so indispensable for priests. This quote pretty much says it all. The Samaveda is really unique. It's the musical Veda. It takes hymns, mostly from the Rigveda, and arranges them so they can be sung and chanted. It's not just a religious text, it is literally the foundational text of all Indian classical music. How cool is that? And finally, we have the Atharvaveda, which is maybe the one we can all relate to the most. It's basically a practical guide for everyday life. It's got hymns and formulas for everything, from medicine and healing rituals to prayers for protection, social harmony, and family stuff. It really shows how Vedic knowledge was meant to touch every single part of a person's life. Okay, so those were the samhitas, the core hymns. But the knowledge didn't just stop there. The next layers of texts are all about explaining, interpreting, and digging deeper into the philosophy behind that core material. So first up are the Brahmana texts. If the Yajurveda was the priest's handbook, you can think of the Brahmanas as the expanded, super detailed how-to guides. They are these long prose commentaries that explain the deep symbolic meaning behind the hymns and give you step-by-step instructions on how to perform the sacred rituals perfectly. And this brings us to the final and, many would say the most profound layer of Vedic thought, the Upanishads. These texts completely shift the focus. It's no longer about external rituals. It's all about internal inquiry. They are the philosophical heart of the Vedas, and tradition recognizes 108 main texts. Each one is a deep, deep dive into the nature of reality, the self, and the universe. And check this out. Here's an amazing connection to our world today. You've definitely heard the phrase Satyameva Jayate, right? It means truth alone triumphs, and it's the national motto of India. Well, where do you think it comes from? The Mundaka Upanishad. It's just a perfect example of how this ancient philosophy is still living and breathing in the modern world. So that brings us to our final big question. We've journeyed through thousands of years of knowledge, but what's its lasting impact? Why do the Vedas still matter today? Well, part of the answer is in the incredible system that was built just to preserve them. These are called the Vedangas, or the 6 limbs of the Vedas. They are 6 entire fields of science, including phonetics, grammar, and astronomy, that were developed for one main reason: to make sure the Vedic texts were recited, understood, and preserved with perfect accuracy over millennia. Think about that. The sheer effort it took to create a whole system like the Vedangas, it just shows how vital people thought this knowledge was. Which brings us right back to that central question. Why did it matter so much back then, and what value does it hold for us right now? Well, its influence is just everywhere. The Vedas form the philosophical foundation for major schools of thought like Vedanta and Yoga. They deeply shaped all the great literature that came later, like the famous epics and the Puranas. They even contain these early, pretty groundbreaking insights into fields like linguistics and medicine. And of course, they continue to inspire the yoga and meditation practices that have become a huge global phenomenon. So we end up right back where we started, with the idea of hearing. The Vedas were known as Shruti, which means that which is heard. In a world like ours, filled with constant noise and distraction, maybe the greatest lesson from this ancient library is about the power of deep, focused listening. So I'll leave you with this. How might knowledge that was heard thousands of years ago help us all listen a little better today?